Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening and welcome to our Coexistence and Practice webinar series hosted by the Coexistence Consortium. Before we start today's talk, I would like to give you a brief intro about what we do and the structure of this webinar. We're a network of conservation researchers and practitioners from diverse disciplines, united by a common vision, which is to understand the intricate dynamics of coexistence between humans and wildlife. Our mission extends beyond the conservation of wild animals confined to distant forest pockets. We emphasize the importance of living well with nature, even in our immediate surroundings. Our collective long-term vision is to employ an experimental and evidence-based approach to catalyze a variety of context-specific human-wildlife coexistence projects around the world. So about the structure of this webinar, our speaker will be presenting for around 40 to 45 minutes, after which we'll have a short Q&A session for 15 to 20 minutes. I'll also just introduce our speaker. Dr. Avantika Thapa, she's born and brought up in a small town in the outskirts of Darjeeling. She has received academic training in the field of zoology. After studying the distribution patterns, habitat, and behavior of pheasants and other wildlife species in Darjeeling for her PhD, she came to the realization that human behavior is also an integral part of any wild animal's habitat. This realization made her turn towards humans living near wildlife habitats, their way of living, their behavior towards wildlife. She aims to detangle the complexities of human wildlife conflict through the lens of ecology, human and animal behavior to facilitate human and wildlife coexistence. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today, and over to you, Avantika.
Uh, yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. And yes, I know a couple of guys who have joined, and welcome those who I don't know. I'm here to present a conceptual framework that aims at looking into the prospects of measuring human-wildlife coexistence, which is, of course, very, very complex. That's why it's just a conceptual framework now. So I'd like to, I can't change my slide. I don't know why. Okay. Why didn't I try changing slides earlier?
That's okay.
Give me a second.
No worries.
Yeah, I will stop sharing and reshare again, okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Um, entire screen. Okay, now it's changing now, right? Is it working now? Can
Yes,
you?
it's working. It's
Yeah,
working
yeah.
perfectly.
Okay. So I don't think a lot of people need this introduction, but it's because the entire framework is based on the current most acceptable definition of human-wildlife coexistence. So here it is. It is stated as a dynamic but sustainable state in which humans and wildlife co-adapt to living in shared areas where human interactions with wildlife are governed by effective institutions that ensure long-term population persistence, social legitimacy, and tolerable levels of risk. So the current state of human-wildlife interaction throughout the world and specifically in our country is that both human and wildlife population are on the rise, which is instigating increasing human-wildlife interaction. Wildlife population, of course, in concentrated areas. I'd like to clarify that. And it is also instigated by climate change. For example, in Australia, the majority of the wildlife habitat was in the center of the continent, but because of this widespread fire that broke out, the wildlife population was pushed towards the shores where there's dense human population, so which increased human-wildlife interaction. Uh, Also, habitat fragmentation is something that opens up wildlife habitats to more interaction with humans. Uh, like, for example, highways, especially here in this region where I work in northern part of West Bengal, there's this very big Asian highway being constructed and lots of felling of trees and broadening of the road is kind of opening up kilometers and kilometers of habitat, wildlife habitat to human influence. Um, Also, habitat degradation, as you can see, opens up again the habitat of wildlife species for interaction with humans and conservation efforts. For example, the rising population of Asiatic lions in Gujarat is one of the example, followed by um, the rising population of so many other species in Rajasthan, or the entire tiger population that is so celebrated in the country and throughout the world. The rising population of elephants in Kerala and leopards throughout the country everywhere is an example of how human wildlife population is also on the rise in so many concentrated pockets, which leads to types of human wildlife interaction which is so difficult to categorize because of the subjectivity, and interaction is not always um, interpreted in the same way by different individuals. So, for example, here this event can look like a positive human wildlife interaction from the human side, but we are not sure about what the tiger would be feeling about being photographed and being chased by uh, you know by a convoy of vehicles. Uh, Similarly, there's this very interesting example by a fellow scholar who is studying wildlife in Darjeeling at the moment. She brought this story up where one of the last populations of jackal is being fed by a lady in the locality, and this is actually one of the last known populations of jackal in the area. So they are completely dependent on when this lady feeds them, and they're kind of domesticated. They come out when she calls, and they're being um they're surviving just because of the compassion that this lady is demonstrating, but also the fact that this may or may not have good effect on the golden jackals, but it's better than eradication, of course. So moving to the next example of neutral, what we call neutral, especially in urban spaces, like there are boars feeding on garbage everywhere. And for people living in urban setups, it is like really nothing, we do not perceive it as negative or positive. They are just there, they're doing their business, they're eating our garbage, so we just ignore them. And it may or may not have a positive effect on the birds as well, but so far from my experience, they have. So, there's always this dichotomy of positive and negative impact, not only interaction. Uh, and this is a very straightforward example of how negative interactions are being having impacts on both sides, both humans and wildlife, where elephants are taking lives, and also people are taking lives of elephants. Um, so moving ahead with that, what is our conservation goal? So if we are targeting that, if our goal is to coexist, then our goal should be to have more of these neutral and positive interactions and less of these negative ones. And whatever negative interactions are there, to turn them into neutral and positive. So this is the clear conservation goal that is very straightforward, minus all the complexity that I talked about right now. But then again, after showing you how simple it is, I'm also again going to take you into the depths of how complex it is again, and why, and which will also create kind of a basis for the framework for to be more understandable to you. So how do you know if this conservation goal that we just talked about is achieved? It is not something as simple as, the findings of the India State Forest Report, this much percentage increase in the forest. So because the complexity lies in these words, dynamic, it can change anytime, and it will continuously change. And the other complex thing is co-adaptation. Co-adaptation has to be from both sides for the good of both, and which should ensure long-term wildlife populations, social legitimacy, and again, tolerable levels of risk. So I'm going to show you some examples that have kind of worked on the same lines towards the current definition. And I'm also going to tell you how complex this word in itself is. So this is a classic example of the confusion that happened. I'm sorry, there's no year here, but it's approximately 12 years ago, 2012 publication, where when this definition of coexistence was not there. So, the definition was formulated in 2016, and this work was from 2012, which says coexistence between wildlife and humans at fine scale. So here we are talking about tiger specifically. So these graphs are more of tiger concentrated. So here we can see that the detection probability of tiger increased with distance from human settlement. That is, they kind of were detected more when the cameras were placed far away from human habitation. Similarly, we can see that um, and there were zero detection probability was very low when there was a lot of human captures here. So this and the tiger kind of existing in this situation was um, was interpreted to be coexisting with people. So the backlash was that a lot of people believed that this was just an error of misinterpretation, and that the authors were mixing co-occurrence with conflict. So people and tiger being captured in the same trail, in the same camera trap, was kind of co-occurrence basically, but was being interpreted as conflict, coexistence. Another discussion happened around this second variable. So the tiger clearly wants to stay away from human habitation, but again, this was also interpreted as coexistence. So there was a big, a big discussion. There was very deep and lengthy discussion about, what is coexistence then? Is co-occurrence simple co-occurrence coexistence, or the strategy of wildlife species to stay in these shared spaces is coexistence. What is coexistence? So that is how the current definition was formulated, that coexistence is a state. It's not a mechanism. It's not a strategy. It's not simple co-occurrence, but it's a state, right? So the next example that I want to show you is adapting to live. Yeah, again, re-clarifying that simply a strategy to coexist is not coexistence. So this is a classic example. To avoid humans, more wildlife now work in the night shift. So this study demonstrated how most of the mammalian species in the world, they are becoming more and more nocturnal in order to live in shared spaces. Okay, so this at a glance looks like it's coexistence. They are doing the night shift, we are doing the day shift, and we are kind of avoiding each other, but we are sharing space again. But again, this has proven to have detrimental effect on wildlife species. So, for example, they lose their natural prey. So, if a diurnal species is dependent on a diurnal prey, for example, a leopard cat, a small leopard cat, and a pheasant species, they are both diurnal. Not leopard cat. Okay, just let me take another name of a diurnal species. Maybe so a diurnal predator will have a diurnal prey, right? But if the diurnal prey becomes nocturnal, it's losing the diurnal prey, right? So there's a huge shift in the food wave, the food chain, the behavior, the everything. And also these diurnal species will have diurnal uh, mates, So they also kind of lose uh, the way of attracting a mate. This happens a lot in pheasants. They have a very, very strict regime of looking for a partner. They have to display, and all that cannot happen in the night. Thank God pheasants have not started going nocturnal yet. But there are these questions that is just the space temporal avoidance, temporarily avoiding humans. Is this coexistence? So moving on to the next question. So what if when humans and wildlife both co-adapt? Is that coexistence? Because that is what the definition says, right? Co-adapting to live in shared spaces. So this example is from the mountains in Bulgaria, where the brown bears co-adapted to live with humans, and the villagers in Yogodina in Bulgaria were migrating from their villages. They were in poverty, and there was nothing for them, and they were hunting bears for nutrition and to sell the hide and the bladder and everything. But then when a tourism company from UK started bringing in tourists to photograph these bears, the whole dynamic changed. The bears became less aggressive, and they became habituated to these photographers. And the people also, 90% of the people in the villages started to getting in tourism activities. And the whole dynamic of hunting bears changed into photographing bears, getting money out of all of the activities. So is this coexistence? We cannot actually conclude, because we don't have this study doesn't give information about the population of bears that are there. Okay, so there's only this human dimension to it. We don't know the other side of this coexistence, right? Moving on to the next example is what social legitimacy and tolerable levels of risk can do. The willingness to coexist can do. This is a classic example of wolves being hunted to eradication, to wolves recovering from almost extinction in the US. So, what people's want and motivation can do. If people really want to coexist, they can. This is a great example of that. So keeping all these examples in mind and all the questions that I have raised uh, led me and my co-authors to formulate um, a conceptual framework that aims at try kind of oversimplifying all this complexity, but also we are trying to work this out in real. So the first part of it says negative occupancy, lower occupancy in shared space would be a negative impact on wildlife. If wildlife is trying to move away from shared space, that means that that species is not kind of preferring to live in that shared space. It wants to run away. And if there's higher occupancy in shared landscape, for example, if you look at foxes and jackals, and classic examples are raccoons, they they live in shared spaces, they exploit shared spaces, they are found more in shared spaces than in wilderness. So so if a species has higher occupancy in shared space, that could be called coexistence. um, but again, we are going to use the occupancy as a proxy for wildlife population. But again, in the second line here, we look at change in activity pattern. So in order to occupy those shared space, is that species deviating its natural activity pattern from how it behaves in a wilder area? Are they being more nocturnal, like the examples that I talked about earlier? And if they are being more nocturnal, that means they're definitely paying some cost for being nocturnal. So also keeping that in mind. And also what people think about, or what people feel about, or what they are doing about this strategy that the wildlife that a species is adopting to be in the shared space. A species being in a shared space, changing its activity pattern. Now, what do people think about it? Because raccoons are absolutely hated where they are. They are declared pest. Or it could be the other way. So we identified these three factors to be the pillars of coexistence. When is the sharing happening, at what cost? And if is the sharing happening at all on the spatial level? Is the population in the shared space at all? And what people think about this sharing of space? Are they willing to share space or not? So these three pillars make the compile to we are aiming to have a human wildlife coexistence score out of these three. So these would typically range from -1 to +1. So for example, I'd like to start from here. So nocturnality, okay? So +1 is no deviation from its natural um, activity pattern, and -1 would be like nocturnality, like completely shifting its activity from being a diurnal to a um, nocturnal species. Or if there is no deviation at all, it would be 0. Similarly, the attitude of people would be scaled from -1 to +1. So 0 would be neutral, -1 would be very negative behavior or attitude. No, no, I want to kill them at sight, kind of a thing. But like a -1 would do that. A +1 would be, compassion and caring. I want to share space and feed maybe. And the occupancy would be scaled also in a similar way. This is just a way of standardizing all the scores that we get from each of the analysis that we are going to do. So 0 would be, no sharing. I mean, like no difference in occupancy in wilderness and shared space. And +1 would be a greater occupancy or in shared space, and -1 would be more comparatively more occupancy in a wilder place. I know it's very confusing, but bear with me. So uh, so the human wildlife coexistence score, after adding all these three factors, could be modeled using influential variables in whatever way, just generalized linear models also, which is the most used one. So we could actually see um, which which of which factor is influencing the score. So for example, demography the age of the people in the village or the shared space. There are examples where younger people are more compassionate, or older people are more compassionate, or younger people are more intolerant to wildlife, or something like that. And also climate change events. I'm sorry, there's a oh my God, what happened? Okay, I just received a call and this thing happened. I don't know how to stop this WhatsApp from
Uh,
popping up. Okay. Got it. Got it. Under control.
cool, cool.
Yeah. Uh, yeah. So also events instigated by climate change have also been proven to, have a great impact on these coexistence scenarios. Like for example, in uh, in Africa, there was this great flooding that pushed all wildlife to higher grounds where there was, less water, and people were also in the higher grounds, already settled in those higher grounds. So there was this yeah, conflict situation happening in these higher grounds where both humans and wildlife have, crowded to kind of escape the flood. The history, culture, and wildlife values, of course, play a great role in what people think about sharing space with wildlife. For example, in a place called in Africa, the uh, lions are, not called lions. They have a name. They have a different term out of, and that term is something that is um, used to also show great respect and also fear, like God, uh, something like that. And habitat characteristics, for example, degraded habitat would, push wildlife to agricultural farmlands looking for more food. So all of this, can actually influence these all of these scores, the occupancy, the activity pattern, or even the wildlife, or just a second, okay. बाबा बाबा उता गएर बोल्नु न.
I think you're still muted, Avantika.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So wildlife personalities is something that has come up, in this it's a new thing. Like, problem causing individuals. They are called PCI. So there are studies that say that not all elephants are problematic. Now, there are certain individuals who are these, raging lone males who do all the damage and who create all the problems. So, if remove will the removal of these wildlife, these individuals who are problematic, increase the uh, coexistence score? All of this is all of these effects, all of these variables, the influence of these can actually be can be investigated through this framework. And the limitation that I want to really focus on right now is the attitude behavior gap. We have been, all social scientists have been really suffering with this, because people don't really behave the way they say that they behave. Attitude may be positive, but their behavior may not be, and there's no way to monitor the behavior of people except for using surveillance cameras, and which is not allowed at all, because that's breach of privacy. So uh, so this we have to solely rely on a reported attitude of a respondent in order to see how the coexistence scenario is, because uh, not negative attitude is often judged, is criminalized in a lot of places, like in our country. So people are really reluctant to say what they actually feel, and so the problems like these are also there in this framework that we are trying to work on. This is in a very, very nascent state, and we aim to improve it in the days to come. But this is what it is now. I'm going to keep more time for discussions than explaining right now, and I cannot change my slide again. I'm so sorry. Uh, I think I can now. Yeah. So, for example, this framework is also very important when we look at it in terms of the global IG biodiversity targets. And if we zoom into this area of ineffective framework, which was one of the major reasons why the IG biodiversity targets failed, 2020, we all of the countries failed to reach these targets because the goals were unclear. There was no framework developed um, to monitor the progress, if the progress was happening at all. And living in harmony with nature is one of their targets, and there's no way to kind of evaluate if people are living in harmony with nature uh, if we don't have a framework that kind of concisely gives us a number, in the most advanced form of this framework. So yeah, so such frameworks are also very useful for not only in a localized scale but also in a global way. So, like I said earlier, it enables scenario assessment. Where is coexistence happening more peacefully? Which village or which state or which unit area, which shared space is has more scores, higher scores than another one, or it will also help us compare results from these different areas, from protected areas or non-protected areas, or from one PA to next other PA. Where is it happening more and why? Can learn from where it's good, the situations are better, and try kind of uh, doing the same in the areas that have lower scores. Also, intervention assessment is a great thing that this framework can do. For example, we ask for funds to foster coexistence, and we don't have a before and after to give to the funding agencies. We don't know what is the we are often faced with difficulties when we are telling the agency that this is the output or this is the income, the after of the intervention that I'm proposing. So the failure of also projects, or even the success of projects, lies becomes very dicey and unclear if there's no clear method to say that this is the before and after. Um, like I said, monitoring would be possible. Regular assessment of human wildlife scores will make it possible to assess situations before they get too bad, before the situation's worse. Because often here, attention is only paid after situations get worse. For example, the wolf case in UP, the wolves started killing people, and then the authorities went and killed wolves. So that's the worst thing that we want at this moment. So if the alarming levels are reaching, then the management agencies can kind of act before things get that bad. you know it is also an effort to introduce a new way of, thinking about coexistence, about, thinking that it's complex, and, we cannot untangle, and we cannot, no, this is very complex, and there are lots of people involved, and there's all these history of coexistence and all of that involved, and so this is unachievable, or, achievable, but we don't know how, kind of a mindset, to more of a, it has been criticized to be oversimplistic and mechanical. But the funding agencies want progress. And when I tried writing these grants, this was something that has always hampered my applications. Like, how am I going to show them that my intervention worked? You know, so something like that. Yeah, and so this is it. Oh yeah, I have one more. Uh, this is something that I've not been able to answer myself as well. So I read somewhere in a ethnographic study that a respondent said, I always loved wild boars, even if it was to eat them, you know. what do you think this interaction or this statement is, positive, negative, or neutral, it's really subjective. So this is the also the being said that it's achievable and all, but it's extremely complex, and we understand that it's completely reasonable for people to say that it's a oversimplification, but this is the reality of coexistence. People say things like this and people feel things like this man was generous enough to say it in front of an interviewer, and a lot of them are not. So, yeah, I'd like you to rethink and, storm a bit about where would you want to place this statement in the continuum. And thank you. This you can read this by scanning this QR. And these are my lovely co-authors who are also my seniors who helped me get this, thing together. It was a mess, just like it is right now when I'm speaking to you. But yeah, these guys said that it's possible, and they did help me draft it, and they put a lot of effort in making it publishable. So yeah, I would love to get a lot of questions on this. And yeah, thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Avantika. That was an amazing talk. I learned so much about so many things, and particularly the framework which you shared, the illustration with the three continuums. That was so unique, and it's very interesting to see. So thank you so much. Um, it would be great if everyone could turn on their cameras and we can have a conversation and ask Avantika any questions that you might have. Seema, I see that your hand is raised.
Hi, Avantika. Hi,
Hi.
and I'm so sorry that I could join only this late. I just joined a couple of minutes back, and
Oh
I'm
no, it's
sorry
a
I missed your
Saturday,
talk.
December Saturday.
It's a Saturday, yes, and but I really wanted to the whiteboard at the end. I personally would say that, yeah, especially when you go to other broad countries, you do have this feeling of eating a lot more wild meat that is not so common in India.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always in from the Indian context, it's always looked at as a negative interaction, but not so much when you go into any other country. Like we've been to other places, and most of the places, even whale meat is considered not so it's considered like a positive interaction or
Mm-hmm.
maybe neutral interaction, but not so negative interaction. But
Yeah, yeah.
if in from the Indian context, because the way that we have been taught, or the Wildlife Protection Act that comes down to us, so it has been like a top down approach in our head where we say negative interactions.
Yeah.
What do you on a spectrum do you think, how is it working for you?
Oh, so I thought a lot about it, and then I thought, maybe we should consider the status of the species. Oh my God, status of the species, or even how much they are being hunted and for what purpose. Like if it's purely just a cultural thing, nutritional thing, or is it being really being done for in a commercial way, to be sold out intensively. So there are lots of other things that come into play. I think population is one of those things that I'd really consider, because wild boar is something that we see all the time, especially where I live. So I wouldn't mind people eating wild boars at all. It would be a positive interaction for me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Avantika? I believe that we got a question in the chat.
Mhm. Should I read it myself? Yeah, I can see it now.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it was insightful presentation. Thank you so much. Correct me if I'm wrong. It seems only generalist type of animals have a higher chance of achieving coexistence, sure, unlike specialists such as tiger who try to move away from the human scape. Yeah, 100%. That's why all of this conservation effort is being targeted to species that are more vulnerable, like tiger, elephants, and leopards or other species, and not to wild boars or raccoons or deers or monkeys, you know. So definitely, I'd like to add that, species that are more adaptable are more likely to coexist. So if, for example, if I just talk about the tiger case in Chitwan, the study happened in Chitwan 12 years ago when they were moving away from people and moving away from habitation. But tiger populations have doubled since then in Chitwan National Park, you know. So maybe moving away and avoiding people is also doing good to them, they not necessarily have to, be in harmony and, holding hands and running around together to, be able to survive. So it's incredible how these species have doubled in numbers even after wanting to uh, avoid people all the time. Yeah, thanks for the question.
Hi, Avantika.
Hi.
Thank you for your presentation. I just wanted to understand one point where you said that we cannot understand the behavior of people until, but we can understand the attitudes and how cameras can capture that behavior. So, can you stress on it and your experiences also from the
Mm.
field? Because I think you work a lot on camera trapping as well, and how uh, you take into account of this.
Okay, so a classic example would be uh, a deer or a boar or any animal would not understand if your attitude is negative towards it unless you throw a stone at it or stick an arrow in its heart or kill its, fellow mate or uh, until it sees that you are harmful, you're hurting it, you're doing something physical, your mental attitude will not affect the species at all, right? So even if your really attitude is really negative, I want to kill this monkey at sight, kind of a thing, but because you have no means to do it, you don't own a gun to kill a monkey, you don't have the skills to trap it, you don't have the legal right to poison it or something like that. So see, we are talking about legal setup, okay, not छुप के कुछ भी करते हैं, but then when it comes to legal things, so because you are binded by legalities of our constitution, no matter how much negative you feel about it, you still won't be able to do anything about it, right? And that the monkey will never be fearful of you unless you actually hurt it, even if you hate it. So that's the thing, that an attitude and behavior gap really comes into play, you know. So there are people would absolutely hate monkeys. In my place where I live, people absolutely hate monkeys and peacocks and wild boars, but they're still in abundance. That doesn't mean that they are coexisting like peacefully. That it's not a positive coexistence. It's a coexistence more in conflict kind of a situation. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, thank you. Like, I still have a bit of confusion that how attitude and behavior, I think attitude, they are very closely interlinked. So,
They are,
to
yes, they are very closely. That is why everybody, all social scientists and the entire world is using attitude as a proxy for human behavior. But there are still limitations to its application in terms of wildlife interaction. That's because wildlife doesn't really understand attitude; it understands behavior. So yeah, we'll have a discussion about it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Avantika.
Hi.
Hi. I mean, just to continue on that discussion about tigers' numbers increasing after they moved away from human settlements. So, in the case of wild boars here in BR Hills, their numbers are increasing after they started coming into human settlements.
Mhm.
So, how do you fit these two diverging scenarios in your framework?
Okay, so this framework is very species specific and area specific. So this framework would not work on wildlife as a whole. But this is like so if I want to assess the coexistence score of tiger in a space, I would only assess for tiger in one shared space. Maybe that space would largely depend on the home range of that species that I'm trying to assess. But then a tiger would have a different score, a wild boar would have a different score in a different place, like in site A, boar score would be this, and site B, boar score would be that, and again tiger score will be different. So because boars and tigers have completely different body size, behavior, even threat to human. If we just talk about how much people are fearful of tigers and how much people are fearful of boars, it's completely different. So yeah, Vinay, that's it would the basis of this. And thank you for raising this question because I've been saying wildlife, wildlife, wildlife all the time. But yeah, different species, different place, different assessment. I hope that answers your
Yes.
question.
Yeah, I just have one leading question. I'll
Yeah,
stop
yeah.
about it. So if let's say in my place both wild boar and tiger are overlapping here, so
Mhm.
then you need to have, like, let's say, like you said, we analyze differently for these two animals, and then how you are going to have something out of it at the overlap of these two results or whatever it is.
Okay, so they are both. So there's wild boar also in the same space, and there's tiger also in the same space. And then you want to know how the presence of these two species in a place influences the thing. Okay, so I would put it up in a way that um, when I ask questions to people, I would ask them three questions. Okay, like in a Likert scale, maybe the most common thing that we use is how strongly do you feel about conserving tiger? So on a scale of 0 to 10, um, so I would ask them the same question about tiger, the same question about boar in a different way, and then I would kind of compare. I would ask them a question that would have both in it. So as a whole, tiger and boar. So how do you what do you feel about conserving these two species instead of asking one and two? And then you can also have the occupancy of both the species together, clubbed as together, or to club separately also and together also, to see how much difference it brings to the scores. It's wildest imagination. Okay. I know it's very difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks a bit complex. Thank you for answering.
Thank you so much for the question.
I actually had a question too.
Yeah, yeah.
So the code that you showed us, the illustration with the three continuums, has any researcher approached you yet asking if they could use this framework for their research? Because I feel
No,
like,
I wish they did, but I am trying to use it myself in some of the data sets that I have. Uh,
hmm,
yeah, hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah.
yeah, because it seems like a fantastic tool for science communication, for actually putting your research out there. This is something that people can just take a quick look at and actually really easily understand. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, dear.
Does anyone else have any questions? If so, I think we can wrap up. Seema, were you going to say something? Okay. Thank you so much, Avantika. This was a very insightful presentation, and I'm sure that all of us are going to take away a lot of information from this, both about the research that you have done and how we can apply that to the research that everyone else is doing. So yeah, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing everyone for our next webinar. Thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining, especially on a December Saturday. I cannot be more grateful for your presence here. Thank you. Bye bye. Have
Stay
a
tuned.
lovely New Year. New Year. Yeah.
Yeah.